Hey guys, I'm sorry this late. It's blizzard season here in Canada, so I've been out there all day basically shoveling. But, oh boy, let's talk about this chapter. Because right out of the gate, I have to say, both in page construction and artwork, the lamp memorial scene was absolutely beautifully done, and honestly, perfectly executed on Mashima's part. Like, I thought Mashima was kind of done emotionally beating us with Witch's death, but how he honored her in this chapter was just breathtaking, honestly. And just the whole atmosphere of seeing panel after panel of lanterns float to the sky is one of those scenes where you just find yourself getting lost in the moment and truly taking in the I guess the gravity of just how many people have been lost during this conflict now. Not just Witch. Like it's almost one of those scenes where it really doesn't matter whether you cared for any of the characters that died or not. Again, the atmosphere alone makes you reflect on just how many how many people, how many beings have lost their lives during this conflict. And in that respect, it is a very human moment. Like in this moment, no one is like a certain species, a robot, they're all just they're all just humans in this moment, reflecting on those they've lost. And it is moments like that does give me confidence of saying that however Mashima ends this series, or whatever happens when the crew finds Mother, he is going to honor these sacrifices. He's not just going to flip a switch and resurrect them. Because in this moment as well, which it's in this moment as well, I think illustrates something that I think a lot of people still seem to underestimate about Shiki as a character, which is that for however much people want to knock Shiki for being like a gray Natsu copy from the outset, Shiki as a character is much more emotionally mature. So like when we get to that point, when we get to that end of the series, where Shiki finds Mother, I think the wish he ultimately makes to Mother may not be the one we think. And keeping that in mind, the other thing I think we have to remember is that from what we've understood from Mother's abilities, it's a give and take. So even if Shiki were to resurrect the people they've lost, might lose going forward, he's not going to do it if it demands like too high a price. In this case, if it requires him to sacrifice the friends he still has when he gets there. I think the only way he'd do it is if it's at a cost to himself. Like if he were to ask to give up his own life to save everyone, I think that would be what Mashima would ultimately do. But in this case, yeah, I don't think it's going to be like the way we think it will. Like you have to keep in mind like Shiki's emotional maturity here, and I think again this is a chapter that does show it in spades, honestly. Now, apparently from looking on Annie Twitter, there's a vocal group of people who are more than a little upset with Justice in this chapter for basically falling for Jesse's bullshit about Creed's death. And don't get me wrong, I've had my frustration with Justice's rigid outlook and methods more than I've made that more than clear that I'm not a big fan of his. But to me, here's what makes this situation a little different, which is that we can see clear as day Jesse is emotionally self-destructing and acting recklessly to such degree where whether Justice actually believes Jesse or not doesn't really matter, because even if he's doing everything he can to cover his tracks, there's only going to be that one thing that's going to cause everything he's doing to blow up in his face. It's just a matter of what happens from now until then, and as well as where the story goes from here. And on that note, I want to talk about that, because honestly, after reading this chapter, there are certain elements to it, but actually between this chapter and last week's chapter, I'm convinced the next major saga or story arc is going to be branching off a bit in terms of narrative. The first branch I think is going to be focused on Elsie and her attempts to liberate her home and stop the civil war that's raging there. Because I didn't say this last week, but I feel her conversation with Siggy has given her initiative to do so. Because in that moment of confronting him, she basically realized that I think Elsie realized she pretty much needs more than just her pirate armada alone in order to defeat Ziggy. And what better than uniting the military strength of two kingdoms that have been at war? Like, honestly, what also reinforces this for me is just the idea that the Interstellar Union Army has labeled her a non-significant threat, meaning aside from still having to deal with Justice and his BS, Elsie can now operate under somewhat more under the radar now, and kind of start and focus more on just on what she needs to do in order to take down Ziggy. And again, I think she realizes that she's gonna need a lot more political and military power to do it, and what's going on in her home country, in her home world, I think is part of, I think, what needs to happen now. The second branch, although getting to the second branch now, of what I think is what it's going to be focused on our main cast of crew, which is the second branch is going to be our main cast of crew focused on going to Oeda. I think that's where it's going to take the Eden Zero crew next. Because now armed with the knowledge that the Seiji Creed was a member of the Shogunate's family, I think that is going to give Homura the more even more of a reason in order to return home and change things for his sake, to change the way that to change the culture of Oeda there. I think that's probably where we're headed next with her. I can't say for certain, but it feels like that's kind of the next logical step for the Eden Zero crew now. Of course, to see their now how Mashima will tie these two stories together, if at all, kind of remains to be seen. Like, that's the one thing that I'm like, okay, this is probably going to be the next step, but how is he going to tie these two separate stories together, if at all, or is it just gonna focus on it? Because honestly, I'd be perfectly okay if Mashima had just kind of kept these, like, the story of the story of the crew of the Eden Zero crew possibly going to Oeda, and then the story of Elsie liberating her homeworld. I wouldn't mind if he kept those as two separate stories, because I kind of want part of if the next logical step for Elsie is to liberate her homeworld, I kind of want her to do that alone. I don't want Shiki and the others kind of involved. I just want it to be like her story kind of thing. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but again, it'll be interesting to see. It'll just be interesting to see if that's the case. With that said, obviously the other huge element of this chapter is we get semi-introduced to the last three Orashian Seis Galactica, or 6 demon generals. But the two I want to focus on are Dead End Crow and the other is Aknoel, which, yeah, subtle naming there, Mashma. Like, you couldn't pick any other name we wouldn't associate with Acnologia. Like, yeah, really, man. But anyway, I want to start with Crow, because just looking at his very basic design and the background choices surrounding him with cogs and clocks and all that, we can tell he's definitely a time-based threat. I feel just by getting these small aesthetic details, that's kind of who he is as a character, and just getting those small aesthetic details about the character already puts him square in the sights to be a foil for Rebecca and set him up for Rebecca's next big arc. It just from introduction alone, it feels like that's what Mashima's doing here, and the fact that Mashima didn't even have Rebecca awaken her overdrive when so many others did during the Nero 66 arc makes me think that even more. Now similarly, And now similarly, I'll be curious what Majima has planned for has his planned for Act Noel as a possible antagonist, if she'll even be one at all, because even just as a character existing in this world, she's called the Mother of Dragons. It kind of already says to us, and we see that big dragon robot in the background of her silhouette. That already says that she's the one responsible for the creation of the dragons in this world. And just that fact alone has immense amount of world building potential. Because if I'm reading the room right, it could possibly mean that Act Noel is like somehow like the cosmic caretaker of Dragonfall. Like she's the one who oversees the border between the Sakura cosmos and the wider cosmic space. So yeah, it's just overall I'm seeing some real great like storytelling potential with from Act Noel here, and I mean and then we've got the whole Pope guy, I guess. But I think that's kind of headed for a bit more of an obvious direction. Like the fact that he's basically this archbishop kind of the character. Yeah, we're going in a bit more of a religious direction there, which should be interesting to say the least. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, Analyst Crunchyroll. Be sure to hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button, and just share the video around, guys. Dark Knight of Enemy, signing off. Later, everyone.